Friday night in a Denver suburb, Brett Ludwig is 15 years old and plans to spend the evening watching TV with his mother, Dorothy Britt. Then, at 10 p.m., Dorothy receives a phone call. She tells Brett that plans have changed and she's going out. Although she doesn't tell her son who was on the line, Brett believes that his mother has agreed to meet her ex-husband, Larry Britt, a man Dorothy had divorced 2 months earlier after an abusive 3-year marriage. A man Brett Ludwig had hoped was out of their lives for good.
Larry was a brutal drunk, is how I would put it. And their relationship was one of beatings through bouts of drinking, all-night drinking.
Later that night, Brett hears Larry Britt's custom pickup truck outside his bedroom window.
So it made a very distinctive sound, and I knew it was his truck. So I knew she was meeting with him. He had cajoled her into one last drink or something.
At 9 a.m. the next morning, Brett wakes to find that his mother has not come home. The teenager is concerned. His mom has never stayed out all night and never missed a day of work. At 9:30, the phone rings. It's Larry Britt on the line, asking if Dorothy is at home.
I immediately knew, then and there, that something terrible had happened. And I accused him then, "What did you do?" And he said, "Nothing."
The boy doesn't believe Britt. He calls his older sister, Susie Kreminga, and tells her their mother is missing. She too believes that something is very wrong. The siblings place a call to the Lakewood Police Department. A police officer takes a missing persons report, but tells them that nothing can be done for 72 hours. 3 days later, there is still no sign of Dorothy Britt, and the missing persons report is handed over to Lakewood Police Detective Phil Anderson. When Anderson arrives at Dorothy Britt's home, the first person he speaks with is her son, Brett.
Oh, he was convinced. He was convinced. There was no doubt in his mind, I don't think ever any doubt in his mind, that Larry had done something to his mother.
After talking to family members, investigators begin to retrace Dorothy Britt's movements on the night she disappeared. Detective Clarine Shelley finds her way to a bar called the Front Range Inn, a place that Mary and Dorothy frequented while they were married.
There were employees at the bar that had seen both Larry and Dorothy at the bar that previous night. They were there until closing time. 2 o'clock was determined later. And 2 or 3 of the employees had actually seen them.
One bartender tells police he saw the couple drive away in Larry Britt's pickup, making Britt the last person seen with Dorothy before she disappeared. When police question Larry Britt, the suspect says he never saw Dorothy that night. Detectives obtain a search warrant for his truck.
While we were searching the vehicle, we discovered a large quantity of blood underneath and on the back of the seat on his pickup truck.
Detectives send samples of the blood to the crime lab. In 1974, before DNA technology, forensic testing is able to determine that the blood is human, and it is the same type as Dorothy Britt's. When his story is challenged, however, Britt doesn't waver.
Absolute denial in terms of contact with Dorothy or knowing what would have happened to her, why she wasn't home.
Even without a body, detectives want to move on their suspect. They take their case to the local DA and ask him to charge Britt with murder. On August 29, 1974, Larry Britt is arrested and charged with first-degree murder. 2 months later, the accused stands before a judge, clutching hard at an alibi, in the form of a woman he married just days before the hearing, a woman named Betty Curley.
Betty came in and indicated that he was at her apartment and had been there prior to 12:30 the evening before and had been there all night long until 9 o'clock the next morning, and we couldn't shake her.
The judge decides the case against Britt is not strong enough to go to trial. Larry Britt walks out of the courthouse a free man, while Dorothy Britt's family is sentenced to 2 decades of anguish, as the investigation into their mother's disappearance goes cold. 25 years later, Clarine Shelley is a division chief with the Lakewood PD. At the time of the disappearance, Shelley was a rookie cop and worked the case. Now she decides to reopen it and begins by checking on the state of marital bliss between Larry Britt and his alibi, wife Betty. Phil Tenney tracks Betty Britt to an assisted living facility in Central California.
Not very good health. A smoker, a drinker for her entire life. She was on oxygen, using a walker, and in her early 70s. And then you said Larry came home and passed out on the couch.
Yeah, he came in the morning.
He came in the morning. Remember about what time?
Well, it was getting light.
It was getting light? Okay.
Betty now claims it was getting light out by the time Larry Britt returned to her house in the early morning hours of August 17th, leaving Britt ample time to kill his ex and dispose of her body. He comes across several small plastic bags containing samples of blood collected from Larry Britt's truck in 1974. Phil Tenney sends his samples to Dr. Melton, who is able to extract a genetic code from the bits of blood found in the back seat of Larry Britt's truck. Then a second problem arises. Without the victim's body, there is no sample to test against the unknown profile.
We needed to look at a maternal relative of hers. That is somebody who would be expected to have exactly her same mitochondrial DNA profile, and that would be her son, who's inherited precisely her mitochondrial DNA type from her.
Brett Ludwig is Dorothy Britt's son. For 25 years, he has believed that Larry Britt killed his mother. Now he rolls up a sleeve and provides a vial full of blood in the hopes of proving exactly that. Dr. Melton takes Brett's blood, extracts a genetic profile, and compares it to the unknown DNA found in Larry Britt's truck.
And what we found was that those blood flakes that came from Larry Britt's truck had the same mitochondrial DNA type as that of Brett Ludwig.
In July of 1999, detectives present their case to the DA's office. 5 months later, a grand jury issues an indictment for murder against Larry Britt. On a New England morning, detectives from Colorado come knocking on Larry Britt's door. They place him under arrest for his ex-wife's murder. The 59-year-old man still has nothing to say for himself. When Larry Britt's lawyer broaches the subject of a possible deal, Easter strongly considers, but not before talking it over with Dorothy Britt's family.
We explained what the downside of going to trial was. We cared an awful lot about what they wanted and what they felt.
The family's overriding concern is that Larry Britt never walk the earth as a free man, ever again. They also want to finally know what Britt did to their mother.
And so we made that deal that he had to be interviewed by the best polygrapher that I know, and that he had to pass a polygraph on those issues before we would give him the deal.
In January, Larry Britt is strapped into a polygraph machine and finally tells police the why and how of Dorothy's murder.
She was arguing with him. He got upset. There was no remorse. He was a very matter-of-fact interview. They were arguing. He got mad, so he shot her. It was, in his mind, it was that simple.
Britt goes on to tell Tenney what police have suspected since 1974, that he buried her body in a gravel pit at the construction site of the Chatfield Dam and Reservoir. On January 22, 2001, Britt pleads guilty to the reduced charge of manslaughter and is sentenced to 10 years in prison.
So it was a definite. He was going to jail. And, you know, at his age and his state of health, you know, a time when you should be able to look towards retirement or, you know, at least enjoy the few years of your life, he's going through, I imagine, a harsh acclimation. So there's a measure of justice. Is it the full measure? I think not.